Imagine a technology so powerful that it was designed to make you smarter, faster, more connected to the world than any human being in history. Imagine scientists, engineers, and visionaries pouring decades of their lives into it, believing, genuinely believing, that they were handing humanity its greatest tool. And then imagine that same technology, quietly, methodically, over the span of just 2 generations, rewiring the human brain. Not through force, not through surgery, not through anything you could see or feel, but through convenience. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is the story of the internet and what it has done to the mind that invented it. The year was 1969. A small team of researchers at UCLA sent the first message over what would become the ARPANET, the embryonic ancestor of the internet. The message was 2 letters, L and O. The system crashed before they could finish sending login. It was, appropriately, a glitch, but nobody cared because what they had just done was send information from one machine to another across a network. For the first time in human history, computers were talking. 56 years later, there are over 5.4 billion internet users on this planet. More than 330 billion emails are sent every single day. Every minute, humans upload 500 hours of video to YouTube, send 6 million WhatsApp messages, and conduct 8.5 million Google searches. By every measurable standard, the internet is the most transformative invention in human history. And yet, cognitive scientists are raising alarms. Neurologists are publishing papers with titles that would have seemed absurd 20 years ago. Attention spans are measurably collapsing. Memory recall is degrading. Emotional regulation is deteriorating, especially in people who grew up after 2007, the year the iPhone launched and the mobile internet became personal. So what happened? How did the tool that was supposed to free our minds end up chaining them? That is what we're here to find out. Let's go back to the beginning, not just to understand what the internet is, but to understand what we were promised. In the 1990s, as the World Wide Web became publicly accessible, the narrative around it was almost religious in its optimism. Visionaries like Nicholas Negroponte, founder of the MIT Media Lab, wrote entire books about a future where information would flow freely, where geography would become irrelevant, where the child of a farmer in rural Kenya would have access to the same knowledge as a student at Harvard. And they weren't wrong exactly. The internet did democratize information. Wikipedia, launched in 2001, became the largest encyclopedia in human history, written and maintained entirely by volunteers. Khan Academy gave free world-class education to hundreds of millions of students. Open-source software built the digital infrastructure of the modern world. The promise was real. But here's the thing about promises. They tell you what you're getting. They don't always tell you what you're giving up. When the internet evangelists were painting their utopian visions in the 1990s, they weren't thinking about what happens to a brain that suddenly has access to an infinite amount of stimulation at all times in the palm of its hand. They weren't thinking about dopamine.
Here is something your school almost certainly didn't teach you. The human brain, your brain, my brain, is running on hardware that hasn't been significantly updated in approximately 300,000 years. Our brains evolved for a very specific environment: small tribes, scarce food, constant physical threats, and limited information. The mechanisms that drive our behavior, reward, fear, curiosity, social belonging, were engineered by millions of years of evolution to keep us alive on the African savanna. And for almost all of human history, that was fine, because the environment we lived in matched the brain we had. But then, in the span of roughly 30 years, we introduced a variable so alien to our biology that evolution had absolutely no framework to handle it: infinite, on-demand, algorithmically optimized stimulation. Let's talk about dopamine, because you cannot understand what the internet has done to the human mind without understanding this molecule. Dopamine is not, as popular culture would have you believe, simply the pleasure chemical. That's a dangerous oversimplification. Dopamine is better understood as the anticipation chemical. It doesn't fire when you get the reward, it fires when you expect a reward might be coming. This is the mechanism that made our ancestors endlessly curious, endlessly motivated to explore. It's the engine behind human ambition. And it is also, as neuroscientist Kent Berridge discovered in landmark research at the University of Michigan, the very mechanism that drives compulsive behavior. The wanting system, as Berridge called it, operates independently of the liking system, which means you can desperately want something, obsessively, compulsively, and not even like it when you get it. Sound familiar? Every person who has ever scrolled endlessly through their phone at midnight, not really enjoying themselves, unable to stop, they've experienced Berridge's distinction firsthand. Now here is where the internet becomes something extraordinary and extraordinarily dangerous. In 2009, a young engineer at Twitter named Paul Graham wrote a brief internal note. He called his idea the pull-to-refresh mechanism, the gesture that would allow users to swipe down on a feed to check for new content. It was inspired, Graham later admitted, by the slot machine, the uncertainty of what you'd find. Sometimes nothing, sometimes something exciting, always the possibility of a reward. This is operant conditioning. B.F. Skinner demonstrated in the 1950s that the most powerful way to reinforce behavior is not to reward it every time, but to reward it unpredictably. Variable ratio reinforcement. It's the psychological principle behind gambling addiction. And it is now baked into every social media platform, every news feed, every email inbox on Earth. The tech companies knew this. They employed behavioral psychologists. They ran hundreds of A/B tests. They optimized their platforms specifically to exploit dopamine variability. Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist at Google, testified before the U.S. Senate in 2019. He said something that should have changed the world, but largely didn't. A handful of people working at a handful of technology companies, through the choices they make in designing these products, influence how 2 billion people think. 2 billion people, influenced by the deliberate exploitation of a 300,000-year-old piece of biological hardware.
Let's stop for a moment and look at what the data actually tells us. A 2015 study by Microsoft found that the average human attention span had dropped to approximately 8 seconds, down from 12 seconds in the year 2000. That is shorter than a goldfish. Now, to be fair, that particular statistic has been contested by cognitive scientists, who point out that human attention is far more context-dependent than a single number can capture. But what is consistent across the research is this: our ability to sustain deep focus, the kind required to read a long book, analyze a complex argument, or solve a difficult problem, has measurably declined in the digital age. A 2019 study published in the journal Nature Human Behavior found that global internet searches for topics of interest peak faster and fade faster than they did a decade ago. The collective human attention cycle, how long society focuses on any given idea, is accelerating. In 2019, the average American spent approximately 11 hours per day interacting with screens. In India and the Philippines, countries with rapidly growing mobile internet penetration, smartphone usage hours are among the highest in the world. A landmark study from University College London tracked over 17,000 children and found a direct correlation between social media use and declining mental health outcomes, particularly in girls aged 11 to 13. The mechanism? Social comparison, cyberbullying, sleep disruption, and the replacement of deep social bonding with shallow digital interaction. But here's the number that should haunt every single one of us. In 1978, the average American read 26 books per year. By 2022, that number had fallen to 12. In the same period, time spent on media, screens, social platforms, streaming, has doubled. We didn't just stop reading books, we replaced deep, slow, effortful cognition with fast, shallow, passive consumption. And that, as we are about to see, has consequences that go far beyond not knowing what happens at the end of War and Peace. In 2018, cognitive neuroscientist Marianne Wolf published a book called Reader, Come Home. Wolf had spent 30 years studying how reading changes the brain. What she found was astonishing and terrifying. Deep reading, the kind of slow, immersive reading you do with a novel or a dense nonfiction book, does not merely transfer information to the brain. It changes the brain's physical architecture. When you engage in sustained, deep reading, you activate regions responsible for language, sensation, visual processing, and, crucially, empathy. You don't just read that a character is cold and afraid. Your brain simulates the experience. Your sensory cortex lights up. You feel it. This isn't metaphor. This is neuroscience. Deep reading develops what Wolf calls the reading brain circuit, a network that enables critical analysis, inference, analogical reasoning, and reflective thought. This circuit, she argues, is the cognitive foundation of human civilization. It is how we process complex ideas. It is how we develop empathy across difference. It is how we think. And it is built through the practice of deep, sustained reading. Now here is Wolf's frightening observation. She noticed in the early 2010s that she herself was struggling to read the long, complex books she had read easily her entire career. Her own deep reading circuit, honed over decades, was showing signs of degradation. Not because she had lost intelligence, but because she had spent too much time reading the way the internet demands: fast, scanning, superficial. If it could happen to a cognitive neuroscientist who studies reading, what is happening to the billions of people who have grown up in a digital environment where deep reading was never normalized in the first place? Now, before we go any further, let's be honest about something. This is not a one-sided story. The internet is also genuinely one of the most miraculous tools humanity has ever created. Consider what it has done for medicine alone. The Human Genome Project, completed in 2003, was only possible because of networked computing and the internet. mRNA vaccine technology, which saved millions of lives during the COVID-19 pandemic, was developed and shared through global scientific networks enabled by the internet. Telemedicine has brought basic healthcare to hundreds of millions of people who live too far from a clinic to access it otherwise. Consider what it has done for economic opportunity. A programmer in Lagos can today work remotely for a company in San Francisco, earning a globally competitive salary without ever leaving their country. A craftsperson in rural India can sell to customers in London through an e-commerce platform. The internet has created economic corridors that simply did not exist 30 years ago. Consider what it has done for political accountability. The Arab Spring, whatever its complicated aftermath, was partly enabled by social media platforms that allowed citizens to organize, document abuses, and break through state-controlled media monopolies. Investigative journalism now operates globally. Whistleblowers have tools that J. Edgar Hoover could never have imagined stopping. And consider at the most human level what the internet has done for connection. Diaspora communities scattered across the world maintain cultural identity through WhatsApp groups and streaming services. Parents separated from children by borders can watch their grandchildren grow up on video calls. Rare disease patients who might have spent their lives in isolation now find communities of others who share their exact condition. The internet is not a villain. But here is the critical distinction that most of the public conversation gets wrong. There is a difference between the internet, the network, the infrastructure, the access to information, and the attention economy, the commercial layer built on top of that infrastructure, whose business model depends on maximizing the time your eyeballs spend on a screen. The internet gave us a library. The attention economy turned it into a casino. And it is the casino that is chaining our minds. Let's talk about something that has quietly become one of the most destabilizing forces in modern civilization:
the recommendation algorithm. Every major platform, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter/X, Spotify, Netflix, uses machine learning algorithms to decide what you see next. The algorithm's objective is simple: maximize engagement, keep you on the platform as long as possible. And the algorithm is extraordinarily good at its job. But here is what the engineers who built it discovered, much to many of their own horror. The content that maximizes engagement is not accurate content. It is not balanced content. It is not even interesting content in any deep sense. It is emotionally activating content. Specifically, content that triggers outrage, fear, and tribal identity. A 2021 internal Facebook study leaked by whistleblower Frances Haugen found that the platform's own researchers had determined that its algorithm was amplifying divisive, extremist content because it drove higher engagement metrics. The researchers recommended changes. Leadership largely declined to implement them because the changes would reduce engagement numbers. The same dynamic plays out on YouTube. A 2019 New York Times investigation found that YouTube's recommendation algorithm consistently pushed users toward more extreme content, regardless of their initial interest. A person who watched a mainstream political video would, step by step, be guided toward increasingly radical content, because radical content generated more watch time. The algorithm doesn't care about your values. It doesn't care about your mental health. It doesn't care about the truth. It cares about one number: the time you spend on the platform. And the result, at a societal scale, is something cognitive scientists call epistemic fragmentation, the breakdown of a shared reality. When two people consume algorithmically curated information environments optimized for their individual emotional triggers, they do not merely disagree on policy. They begin to inhabit completely different factual universes. This is not political opinion. The research is consistent across the political spectrum. The algorithm radicalizes and isolates. It does this to conservatives. It does this to liberals. It does this because radicalization and isolation maximize engagement. A 2020 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that exposure to opposing views on social media, rather than promoting dialogue and understanding, actually increased political polarization, because the algorithm selects for the most emotionally triggering version of opposing viewpoints, not the most thoughtful. We built a global communications network and then handed its editorial function to a profit-maximizing machine with no conception of human flourishing.
So, where does this all lead? Let's speculate, honestly, and based on what is already emerging. Scenario 1. The neural interface future. Companies like Neuralink, Elon Musk's brain-computer interface company, are actively developing implantable devices that would connect the human brain directly to digital networks. Synchron, a competitor, has already implanted devices in human patients. The stated goal is medical, helping paralyzed patients communicate. But the commercial trajectory is obvious. If a chip can let a paralyzed person type with their thoughts, it can, in theory, eventually give a healthy person instantaneous access to all information on the internet, mediated not by a screen, but by thought. This is the next frontier of the attention economy, and the question it raises is not a science fiction question. It is an immediate ethical emergency. If the current internet, mediated through a screen we can put down, is already rewiring our brains in ways we did not consent to, what happens when the interface is inside us? Scenario 2. The cognitive stratification future. There is emerging evidence that people who understand what the internet is doing to their cognition and who actively resist it are gaining a significant competitive advantage over those who don't. Knowledge workers, executives, and academics who practice what researchers now call deep work, long periods of focused, undistracted cognitive effort, are producing disproportionately valuable output in an economy increasingly saturated with digital noise. Cal Newport, a computer science professor at Georgetown, has written extensively about this dynamic. His argument is striking. In a world where most people's attention is being fragmented by algorithmic systems, the ability to focus deeply is becoming rare, and rare things in economics become valuable. The speculative and disturbing possibility is a future where society stratifies not primarily by access to information, which is now nearly universal, but by cognitive capacity to process information deeply. A future where the wealthy purchase digital detox retreats, employ attention coaches, and raise their children in low-screen environments, while the rest of the world drowns in algorithmically optimized stimulation. A cognitive class divide, invisible but widening. Scenario 3. The recalibration. Not all projections are dark. There is a third possibility, one that requires collective will but is genuinely achievable. We have been here before. When television became mass market in the 1950s and 60s, similar alarms were raised. Researchers warned of passive consumption, reduced social interaction, declining literacy. Some of those fears were realized, but television was also regulated over time. Content standards were established, its worst pathologies were at least partially checked. The internet, particularly in its mobile algorithmic form, is already attracting the attention of regulators worldwide. The EU's Digital Services Act, implemented in 2024, requires major platforms to assess and mitigate the societal risks of their recommendation systems. The UK's Online Safety Act imposes obligations on platforms regarding children's exposure to harmful content. Multiple US states have passed or are drafting legislation restricting minors' access to social media. Technology is also responding. A growing humane tech movement, led by organizations like the Center for Humane Technology, is pushing for design standards that prioritize user well-being over engagement metrics. Some platforms have introduced features explicitly designed to reduce compulsive use, time limits, usage dashboards, chronological feeds. And at the individual level, millions of people are waking up. Digital minimalism, the conscious, deliberate reduction of unnecessary screen time, is becoming a genuine cultural movement. Not Luddism, not technophobia, but the recognition that technology should serve human ends, not exploit human weaknesses. The question is whether the recalibration happens fast enough and whether it happens at scale. This channel doesn't believe in ending with despair, so let's talk about what any person right now, today, can actually do. First, understand the architecture. You cannot defend against something you don't understand. The platforms you use every day are not neutral tools. They are systems specifically engineered to maximize the time you spend on them, using every psychological lever known to behavioral science. Knowing this changes how you interact with them. It's the difference between swimming and being carried by a current. Second, protect your attention like money. Your attention is the most valuable resource you have. It is the raw material of everything you will ever accomplish. Every minute of deep focus you direct toward a meaningful goal is an investment. Every minute you spend in algorithmically induced scroll paralysis is a withdrawal from your capacity to think, to create, to feel. Start small. 30 minutes of uninterrupted, phone-free deep work per day. Then an hour. The research on this is unambiguous. Even modest increases in focused cognitive work produce measurable improvements in output quality, creative thinking, and subjective well-being. Fourth, reintroduce depth into your information diet. Read long things. This doesn't have to mean Victorian novels, though there is something to be said for them. It means regularly engaging with content that requires sustained attention. Long-form journalism, books, academic papers, documentary films, complex podcasts.
The point is not the format. The point is that your brain needs regular exercise in sustained focus, or it will lose the capacity. And fifth, be intentional about social media. There is no evidence that quitting social media entirely is necessary or even optimal for most people, but there is overwhelming evidence that passive social media consumption, scrolling without purpose, is correlated with worse mental health outcomes. The distinction that matters is intentional versus passive use. Go on social media to connect with specific people, to seek specific information, to share your own work. Set a time limit, then leave. And fifth, have this conversation with the people you love. This matters particularly for parents. The data on children and social media is genuinely alarming, and it is becoming harder for any honest observer to dismiss. A child's brain, which is still building the neural architecture for emotional regulation, deep focus, and social cognition, is not equipped to navigate an environment optimized to exploit adult psychological vulnerabilities. This doesn't require panic, but it requires honesty, and it requires parents making deliberate choices about the role of screens in their children's development, rather than defaulting to the convenience of handing a child a device.
In 1945, Vannevar Bush, the American engineer who helped build the scientific infrastructure of World War II, published an essay in The Atlantic called As We May Think. In it, he imagined a future device he called the Memex, a machine that would store all of a person's knowledge, allowing them to retrieve and connect information with astonishing speed. It was, in many ways, a prophecy of the internet. Bush believed that such a machine would be the greatest liberation of the human mind in history, that freed from the burden of storing and retrieving information, the human intellect could focus entirely on creation, discovery, and understanding. He wasn't entirely wrong. The internet has, in real and measurable ways, extended human capability. The accumulated knowledge of civilization has never been more accessible. Distances that once defined and limited human connection have collapsed. But Bush couldn't anticipate what would happen when the machine was not just a library, but a mirror. When it didn't just give us information, but watched us consume it. When it learned what made us click and scroll and stay just a little longer. When the tool became quietly an industry, and the industry's product became us. The internet did not chain our minds through malice. It chained them through the oldest economic logic in human history. Find what people want and sell it to them. We wanted stimulation. We got it. Endless, infinite, perfectly optimized stimulation. And we are only now beginning to understand the price. The question, the only question that matters, is whether we are capable of recognizing a trap when we're inside it. Whether we can look at the glowing rectangle in our hands and see it not just as a window to the world, but as a window that looks both ways. Whether we can choose, deliberately and repeatedly, to put it down. Not because the internet is the enemy, but because your mind is the thing worth protecting. And it is, make no mistake, worth protecting.